Hi everyone. Today I'm with Neeti Gupta, who's led partnership for over 2 decades, and she's here to share her experience on the growing states of partnership. Hi Neeti,
Mohan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Great. Thank you for having me on your series. I'm really excited to talk about partnerships. As I was telling you earlier, that's the only thing I've done. So I'm always happy to talk about partnerships and discuss what I've learned along the way.
Wonderful. So, how did you get started with partnerships and partner marketing side of career?
So yeah, I started my career after my master's at from MIT to Microsoft hired me, and of course I didn't start as a partnerships leader right out of the gate. But the more I learned about how Microsoft goes to market, the my realization was that I need to do more with partners because that's how Microsoft goes to market. And I think that was kind of my initial hunch 20 years back, in which I was right about, and that this will be a growing field. Although nobody goes to school for partnerships,
Mhm.
or that's something that companies will need to go do more because, as you know, companies can't do business alone anymore. The complexity of technology continues to increase, and companies will need partners to execute on their go to market. So yeah, so that's how I fell into it because I recognized, and of course because Microsoft was very open for you to go work in roles, in partnerships roles. So I made my way internally to a role to manage partnerships. Yeah.
Wonderful. How has partnership role changed over time?
Yeah, I think the partnerships role is becoming more integral and important to the organization over time. I remember when we started, although Microsoft had dedicated roles, we didn't see that in our partner organizations. So when I managed partners, there were often people coming from sales, marketing,
Mhm.
even product management to take on and pick up the pieces on partnering with Microsoft. And so, what is happening now is more and more organizations are recognizing that this role is important, and they are investing in recruiting partnerships leaders into their organizations now. They are still coming from those backgrounds,
Mhm.
but at least there are dedicated resources. I know we still have a long way to go, and the comparison I would use is with the user experience profession, where it was similar, where the user experience profession wasn't someone that was hired. They grew up in the organization and became part of it, but then, both on the academic side as well as on the practice side, a lot more people started getting trained as designers, and then that became a norm. And so now, if you go to organizations, you find user experience professionals. So I think similarly, that shift is starting to happen. As I said before, more and more companies are recognizing that they can't do the job of a partner manager by just adding part-time resources.
Mhm.
And I do think that there's still more work to be done, because if you talk to partner managers even today, they'll tell you that there's only one or two of partner
Yeah.
managers or partner marketing people in the organizations. And I do think it is a team sport. It
Mhm.
requires more people. But until unless we can show the return on investment of these headcounts, I think that battle will continue to be fought in organizations. So yeah, so I think the role is definitely evolved from not even being a role that organizations would have headcounts for, to now roles, being a role that everyone agrees that there should be someone in place to do this important function in the organization.
Yeah, definitely. I recently went to a partnership leader meetup in Bangalore here, and one of the things we learned as like the partner managers and the alliance leaders within the companies are often the most networked people because they work horizontally across so many different teams internally and externally. So they act as kind of an entry point to the organization when someone wants to partner or like raise discussions, and then they eventually have to involve the other teams as well in this journey.
Yeah, and I do think that there is a perception that you hire a partner manager when you're getting a flood of partners coming and they become the
Mhm.
gatekeepers. But I do think that that's not the right way to think about hiring a partner manager when you have a lot of people, third parties coming to you and saying, hey, we would like to partner with you and we don't have a way to. I think it has to be a more strategic role.
Mhm.
It's not a tactical role of block and tackle all these third parties that are coming away. It needs to be a strategic role, where the CEO basically says, is this a growth lever for our
Mhm.
company, and is there something we can use to drive either brand value or business value, economic value, what have you. But that needs to be a strategic decision organizations make, and I think there is still work, because even though the partner manager is a quarterback who runs across the organization as a horizontal function, um, it still needs to kind of be up leveled from a tactical role to more of a, um, I would say, a strategic role, and that's happening, and that's promising. But it's taken us to at least 2-3 decades to get there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you did mention previously that organizations can be of varying structures. So, how does the role of partner managers change within the different organizations? Maybe from your experience working in different organizations, how have you seen that in play?
Yeah, I think I have worked for the chief marketing officer and reported as a partner leader into
Hmm.
the marketing function. I've also done the same role as a part of the sales organization and also as part of the product management organization. So I think it depends on what is the role of that partnerships, what is the charter. So if it's primarily an independent software vendor, then of course they are integrating into platforms. So that requires more of a product management mindset.
Hmm.
However, if it's more of a resale or a referral business, then that requires more of a sales mindset. And of course, if it's more of building brand value through partnerships and an ecosystem, then of course the alignment to marketing. So I think that's one of the challenges and opportunities in partnerships, is that depending on the function that the partnerships team needs to play, they may be placed under different organizations, and that in itself is a challenge because partnerships role can play a broader role in the organization. And I've always argued that partnerships function should sit directly under the CEO's office, because they
Hmm.
are the horizontal left to right orchestrators for partners or external entities who are coming into the organization to work with and go to market. So I think that there is definitely that opportunity, that it's not just part of a siloed functional organization. Because what happens is when you're part of, say, the marketing organization, their KPIs or their success metrics are going to be different for their organization, and you'll have to align with that, and it may or may not make sense. So yeah, I think that is the key, um, key aspect within the organization,
Hmm.
what needs to happen.
Awesome. So we also talked about how cross-group coordination is very essential for the role of partners. So how do you see that in their experience?
Yeah, I think that is a core role, or a core competency that a partner manager needs to know. If you're not able to coordinate cross functionally, then and that's a weak spot for you, then don't take a partner manager role. And the reason I say that is that when the partners come to the organization to figure out how to partner with that organization that you're part of, a key aspect is to figure out where that fit is. And you can't drive that fit until unless you understand who in the organization and how they're going to work with the partner. So it can be varied. So maybe the interest is to do the integration with your platform or your core product. Then you need to be able to go speak the language of the product management team and work with them. Or if now the product integration is ready and now you need to go to market together, then you need to be able to figure out how to align with the marketing team, with the sales team, and even the customer success team and the support team. And so it's really an end-to-end function where you as a partner manager lays out what that strategy will be right from when the first handshake on the contract happens. And I think, I have seen that sometimes people come from backgrounds where once the contract is done, then they think the job is done. But that's a
Mm-hmm.
problem, because once the contract is done, that's when the job begins. Because now you need to make sure that your company is getting the benefit of that
Mm-hmm.
partnership, right? So that means making sure that it's not falling through the functional cracks. Now you have to make sure. So it requires a lot of negotiation, that requires a lot of a skillful handling of different motivations that different organizations and functions would have. And I've heard partner managers saying, oh, the sales leader didn't want to work with us. Well, it's not because they didn't want to work with you, have not taken the time to align with their objectives. If the sales
Mm-hmm.
leader is supposed to hit a certain quota and your partners can't help them, or it takes too much time for them to close the deal, they're not going to be bought in. So then I think you have to do the critical thinking as a partner manager to figure out how that alignment will happen so that the sales leader comes on board. And you have to start thinking from the marketing managers, the sales managers, the customer success, and the support managers' perspective, or the leaders' perspective, to say, how do I align with their motivations? And if there's no alignment, then call it out and be explicit. And in your conversations with your executive team, is that even if we force alignment, there will be none, because it doesn't, the way we operate for our go to market, it doesn't align well. So that's a different conversation that you need to have as a partner leader than the doing the grunt work of making sure you understand the motivations, the KPIs of each of the organizations. And when you take this role, you'll find that that alignment doesn't exist. That's your job. That's what you
Mm-hmm.
go do and make happen in the organization. And I've seen really good leaders not knowing how to do that. And there is a secret sauce which I'm happy to share, which is you actually create a structured approach where you go and talk, when in your first 90 days, you go and talk to all these functional leaders and build relationships with them, right? You need to get to know who these people are. If you're a partner
Mm-hmm.
manager and within your first 90 days, you don't know who these functional leaders are and what their motivations are, and you haven't talked to them and asked them three fundamental questions, which is, you know, what can I do for you? What would you like me to do? And where are your biggest challenges with partners? If you haven't asked these three questions right in your first 90 days, and you don't have a systematic way of tracking if you're meeting and aligning with them, then you're not doing
Mm-hmm.
your job, right? So I think, to go back, that is the secret sauce of how you do that. And you do that on a quarterly basis. You just don't do it
Correct.
in the first 90 days. You go back and you go and say, look, this is what we have done for the organization. Is it meeting your expectations? Has the business has shifted, or the market drivers have shifted? What are is this the same as we talked about when I first started, or has that changed? And I know that when I did that in my roles, that created a successful partnership across horizontally in the organization, because you become the glue that stitches it
Mhm.
together. But if you're not doing it systematically and you just ad hoc talk to people when you need something from them, then you're not going to get the outcome you want, right?
Definitely. Yeah,
You just have to do it.
makes sense. Yeah. So I think what you're saying is the internal alignment is just as important as aligning with the organizational goals for the partnership department itself, and also like working with the right set of partners. Um, is
I
that
would
correct?
argue that the internal alignment is what makes and breaks
Mhm.
the partnership. I think as a partner manager, because your job is external facing and your
Mhm.
job is to manage the partner, you will do somehow you'll figure out how to do that external facing piece, because that's
Yes.
your, that's what. But I think a lot of partner managers struggle with internal alignment because sometimes they don't think, it's especially when you're starting off in partnerships, that is
Mhm.
important. But
Correct.
I can tell you the one thing that will make or break your career in your organization is that internal alignment. That needs
Mhm.
to be prioritized. And I learned that the hard way. When I didn't prioritize the internal alignment, you get to a point where you don't have the credibility internally to execute on things that you need to do with partners. So, to not only to build your own credibility as a partner leader, but
Mhm.
also to orchestrate the organizations to actually partner well, as I said, the internal alignment and internal orchestration of resources is the most critical and important thing a partner manager must do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I have a question. If I'm a small ISV, for example, right, and I want to start my own partnerships team and hire a person, so what kind of KPIs would I be using to evaluate that person? Is that because that can be challenging at times, I believe, especially when you're starting off with partnerships, right?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a challenge in most organizations today, is how do you measure success of your partner manager? So
Hmm.
I think there are two aspects to that. One is you need to hire people who understand how to do partnerships, right?
Hmm.
If you're saying, let me go hire someone who has never done partnerships before and I will coach them and experiment, well, that could be an approach, but then the outcome will be based on what coaching you provide, right? Um, so I'm not saying there's no space for people who are starting out, and I think the can-do attitude can be very helpful. But people who are seasoned in doing partnerships can also bring a lot of value. So if you can't
Hmm.
hire someone who has some experience, then hire some consultants to augment what that new partner manager right out of the gate. So the KPIs will depend on what your organization needs from the partnership role. So, for example, when I was at GE, our KPIs were very clear. It's revenue,
Hmm.
right? We need to generate revenue. So, as a partner leader, I had to structure our partner program in a way that it was a revenue generating program. Now, if I had to do the same thing for a different organization where the KPI wasn't revenue and it was brand value, then the KPI, then we would have made the partner manager's KPI as number of press releases that we generate or number of blogs that we generate, because that's a different value we are generating for the organization. So I think the KPIs of the new person you hire and how to measure their success should be tied to the what is the organization value you want to generate by hiring this resource in the organization. So as I said, it's not a tactical that go recruit 5 partners and that is your KPI. I think if anyone, as a you are a partner leader and you get hired into the organization and your manager gives you that as a KPI, I think you should be very worried, because that means the organization doesn't understand that your role needs to be aligned to what the goals of the organization is. And so your job then becomes, if you've already taken the job, to make sure you influence and you align to that, um, or negotiate that during your hiring process. because once you've taken on the job, they will expect you to in it's 6 to 18 months to start delivering
Mhm.
value. And that's another thing that often when you're starting in a new organization which is doing partnerships for the first time, you have to be the coach, not your
Mhm.
manager being the coach, right? You have to say this is how we're going to go about doing it. And you don't do that on your first day. You do that after doing that 360 interview process and
Mhm.
understanding the culture of the organization. Then you say, this is what I heard. Based on my experience, this is what we think we need to go do. So I think that would be the approach I would say is KPIs must be aligned to the organizational goal for why you want to do partnerships.
Awesome. That's pretty helpful. Um, so one more question I had is sometimes the organizations you're working with might not have a partner team, right? So how do you handle those situations? And who is the person you work with? And should your approach be any different in that case?
So yeah, I think that will happen more often. I mean, still, as I said, organizations are still hiring people in this role, but that if you are the partner manager on the other side and you have to work with an organization that doesn't have that, I think you need to have an explicit conversation to get a point
Mhm.
of contact, just like project managers do when
Mhm.
they are working with organizations where don't have project managers. So, PMI has done a really good job where they basically say you need to have a project manager and they need to get the certification. We don't have something like that. But I do
Mhm.
think that that's a conversation you need to have with the other side, and if maybe the CEO, the CTO, whoever you're working with, and say, I need someone who can act as a partner manager or a consultant who can come in and be that quarterback, because
Mhm.
without that person's help it'll be very very hard for me to do that. Now there are smaller companies who work with big tech, for example, and they don't have partner managers assigned because big tech companies want the smaller to go through their programs,
Mhm.
right? So you as the partner manager then have to kind of understand how those programs work, who are the people who are driving those programs, and make sure you take advantage of all those programs. But if it's another startup, then you need to have that conversation with their leadership team to give you that point person to work with. Otherwise, you will be navigating not only your organization but also their organization, and then it'll take you longer to drive the outcomes that the business need because it just takes time, right? So get smart.
Yeah.
Don't just do the grunt work. Think about the outcomes and
Yes,
align your day-to-day activities towards the outcome you want to drive for the business.
for sure. Yeah. Um, I'm kind of glad you brought big tech. So that is my next question anyway. So nowadays we see partnerships are revolving heavily around the cloud hyperscalers and their partner programs. So since when have you seen this trend pick up? And have you yourself worked with any hyperscalers in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have worked with all the three hyperscalers in different capacities at different points in my career. And this trend is actually not new because if you look at
Mhm.
the market cap for Google, Microsoft, Amazon, it's in trillions of dollars, right? So um, at least 3.3 trillion for Microsoft. So when you're talking about hyperscalers that big, obviously, and also because they've been doing partnerships for a very long time, eh, from their perspective, they see it as a pyramid, right? So they're top partners that they have managed resources, what they call the partner development managers, who
Mhm.
manage those large relationships, whether they are their independent software vendors or system integrators. Then they have regional, and they'll have regional partner development managers for the regional top partners for them. And then there's at the base is a lot of companies that want to partner with these companies for various reasons, whether it's for their logo, whether it's to kind of get some sales out of them, or for marketing benefit, or even just doing the integration because their feature set needs the platform, right? So my advice, if you're a small company, you have to kind of figure out where you sit. So, OpenAI, when it was a small company, it recognized that what they're doing is something that big tech would need. And so that's an anomaly, but I kind of tell you that story because, of course, OpenAI had to figure out that partnership model with Microsoft, and then now with other companies as Microsoft is starting to shift. And they are partnering with Oracle, and you can see in the news
Mhm.
what they're starting to do. But if you are not one of those core products and you have a complementary feature, then you have to kind of figure out, can you be part of their regional and get their partner management team to work with you? If you don't fall in any of those categories, then you have to figure out how to work through their often tedious
Mhm.
partner programs, because that's the only way you can align. And I've seen some companies do a really good job of, meeting all the needs and the criteria for those hyperscaler partner programs, and then going to each of the events, getting to know their salespeople. But
Mhm.
that requires a lot of heavy lifting from you. The hyperscalers, I think there is this perception that they will do all the work for you. And a lot of CEOs think that once you become part of the Microsoft partner program or Amazon partner network, they will do the hard work for you. That's actually ignorance, because that's not what's going to happen. You will still have to do all the paperwork, and then you have to go and manage the hyperscalers to your advantage. And if you don't have a strategy of how you want to use them, and you don't know how to go about that, then you can spend a lot of time doing useless work. So I would
Yeah.
say that is a strategic conversation you need to have with your CEO. And if you are a partner manager and you find that your CEO and your C level is not tuned in to that idea, then go find another job, because you're not going to get traction. You can spend 3 4 years. After 3 4 years, your CEO will come back and say, so and so, you've not delivered on the promise of partnerships with Microsoft.
Mhm.
you know Either you are let go or you go find something else in the organization to do, depending on how much you are valued internally in the organization. So I think just kind of
Correct.
being very clear what you want out of them, and also setting expectations internally that if we go down the partner um, manage going through the partner program route, then this is
Mhm.
what. And if I know so many companies that have taken advantage of these partner programs and have done really really well and grown and took it, but that was because they put in a lot of effort on their side to do that. So my one tip is, be very clear on what you want from these big tech companies.
Mhm.
And once you are part of their partner program, then put in the time and the resources, and also educate your senior leadership that this would what will take to get any traction with them.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of the times when companies are partnering with big hyperscalers, they also have to basically, like any opportunity they submit, they need to kind of showcase the value they bring to the hyperscaler's customer, which becomes a very key aspect. Because at the end of the day, the hyperscaler also is all about business. And this thing about you mentioned about hard heavy lifting from the ISVs end or system integrators end is also very true, because just the sheer size of the partner networks are like in the hundreds of thousands, and I think they onboard at least hundreds of new partners each and every day.
Yeah.
So that just becomes ridiculously hard for them to keep track of. So if running efficient course programs and automating the entire process is like very key for their success and just being heard and recognized in that huge network, right?
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it depends on what's the value you see from the hyperscaler. If you're just using their
Mhm.
platform, then you're a customer. You're not
Yes.
their partner, right? If you are going to build a complementary solution or maybe even a competing solution for some of their feature set, then you have to be very clear on why you're there. Do you want to get bought? Do you want to get
Mhm.
more visibility? Do you want to I think often the mistake a lot of the leadership teams makes is they will hire a partner manager and they'll say, go use Microsoft as your sales, as our extended sales team,
Mhm.
and go figure out the co-sal program through the uh, partner network? Well, the challenge is Microsoft sellers, until unless it drives consumption for their platform or it can hit one of their KPIs, are not going to, talk to you if you're very, very small, right? You at least have to hit billions of dollars of consumption for them to even matter to them. So
Yeah.
I think that means you have to go internally and reset the expectations that we will get the resources that the partner program is promising, but we are
Mhm.
not going to get their whole entire sales force selling your product, right? Because we are too small for them. We are just a
Correct.
drop in the ocean. And given the power that these big tech companies now have, the hyperscalers have, given the the market cap that they have, um, then if you go to any of the events, the one thing that their leaders will tell you is align with how we do business,
Mm.
right? They don't say we'll align with how you do business. So
Yes.
that's the cultural shift internally. You'll have to educate your leaders is that until unless you provide something of real value to these hyperscalers like OpenAI did,
Mhm.
and that's not the norm. That's not all the
Yeah.
you if you don't provide anything of much value, then they are not going to invest in you. They will go do the investments through their partner programs, but you have to align to their structures of their programs, whether you join their startup programs or whether you join their uh, partner network programs. I think your job as a startup or a small company that's just kind of trying to figure out how to do this will be to get that alignment. And the co-sell piece is a harder piece, right? Because you have to do the co-selling. And Microsoft would
Yes.
or Amazon would just want you to kind of put in the lead. So working backwards from the customer perspective becomes paramount, even in those cases. Because if you, and I think that's the tension with the sales team, because your sales
Correct.
team is saying the partner is not bringing anything, the big tech partner is not
Yeah.
bringing anything. uh, the only reason your sales team needs to be there is one, when you go to the customer, these companies will be there and they will have a seat at the table, right? So you need to know how your product integrates and works or is sits in adjacent to their stack.
Yeah.
Second, if you are competing, then you need to know what they're doing. And then third, your sellers need to be aware that if there is true value, there's true complementary value, then you have an advantage. But
Mhm.
that's your job to understand that dynamic in the customer environment. And often I tell people who I mentor in the partnerships community is spend some time understanding how your customers your sellers are selling to your customers, and what are the kind of
Mhm.
conversations with your partners where the big tech or other partners come up. If you don't have that insight, then you'll never be able to influence your sellers or big tech sellers or any other partner sellers, because you don't know what that customer conversation is. And of course that's a lot of work, because now you're managing the partner, now you're also managing the internal teams, and now you also have
Mhm.
to understand the customer. So do that in your first 90 days, because then you have a little bit of flexibility to understand the partner, understand the internal, understand the customer, because that will put you more, not only because you can network across the organization, but because you have the power of the insights
Mhm.
of three um, areas: the partners, the customers, and the internal stakeholders. And if you become that glue, then you will have that credibility. If you can't talk about customers to your sellers and your partners internally, or with internals what their motivation is, you highly likely will be on an 18-month cycle
Mhm.
in the organization,
Yeah.
which is
Makes
okay,
sense.
by the way. You can do that too.
Perfect. So yeah, I think you've currently been researching a lot into AI in partnerships and also talking about consulting, I think, in the same field. So can you maybe give us a little bit insight on what the current state is of big tech and AI partnerships?
So yeah, so I think the big tech, if you look at their priorities now, all of them, all the three hyperscalers at least, plus the Magnificent Seven, which includes Tesla, as well as Nvidia and Apple, they're all talking about AI. And um, I think the question is this a hype or is it reality, right? I think that market is still testing. But the fact that all these companies have integrated their existing products with some form of automation, whether it's machine learning or even um, AI. So Microsoft example being Copilot. Obviously, Amazon has been talking a lot about what they're doing with Bedrock, and obviously Google Cloud has always claimed that their differentiator has been AI. So this is becoming a market reality. So the question that I like, anyone who's listening to this session is, what is your AI strategy, and do you have a play with any of these hyperscalers on AI? Because if you don't know what your AI strategy is and what use cases you can go to market with this, then you're going to leave a lot of investment dollars that are coming from these hyperscalers behind.
Mhm.
Now, it can be a very simple binary exercise you do. You have a strategy or you don't have a strategy. If you don't have a strategy, then fine. Just know that you won't get that kind of investment and love, because that's where these hyperscalers are shaping and competing. And anytime they compete, that's where the opportunity is, right? But if your company thinks that you do have an AI strategy, or you want to formulate an AI strategy, then now is the time to invest. I mean, even now feels a little late, because people who made the investments have already made the investments. uh, on the partnership side, the kind of interest that I'm seeing is a lot of smaller companies are coming to me and others who are doing the consulting in the space, is to say, how do we work with these big tech vendors? So there's definitely that kind of area that is being carved out, is people who have expertise in working with big tech. There is a need for that kind of expertise in the market. So I think that's kind of where the value add can happen, and it is anywhere from what AI use cases, AI use cases I should work on, to, hey, we already have a AI product, how do we go to market? Or, hey, can you help me figure out how do I what my sales strategy and co-sell strategy should be, now that I have an AI product with using one of these platforms, or integrated with these platforms. um, and can you help us kind of craft what that pitch deck would look like, the market sizing could look like, how much revenue potential do we have if we did work with Microsoft versus Amazon versus Google, or all three, given the resources we have, right? I'm also getting some queries around, how do I shape my organization, because I do want to go and have a hyperscaler strategy. So do I have one person managing all three, or should I have one person each? How does that look like? So I think the exciting piece is that there is a variety of interest in various aspects. Again, being a horizontal role, there's interest across, and to build that strategy. And of course, as people are launching their AI products, there's also interest in, what the go-to-market strategy for those products should be, um, or even just kind of how do I build the relationships, given that I'm a smaller company? How do I work with the partner programs? I've never had to work with these. What is Microsoft's AI partner program, and how do I kind of manage that? So I think that those are kind of categories or areas where there is interest in working with big tech on AI. AI partnerships itself, I think, is forming and norming, because the technology is quite different from what we've had. So a lot of people are just using their experience in cloud partnerships to kind of extend that to AI. But it's different. It's different because now AI is an actor, and especially as more and more companies are launching AI assistants, I think that is also going to change how much of that, you know, work will be done by AI and how much of it would be,
Mhm.
the partner managers or the humans that need to do that. For example, if the data, until the data is siloed, I think our jobs are secure. But as the data gets aggregated and the integrations are more automatic, I think
Mhm.
that shift will happen. So I've always maintained that there are bespoke partnerships which will continue, like we did in cloud partnerships, right? But then there'll be tools, and we are starting to see hyperscalers provide developer tools now where you can go as a developer and integrate with their platforms, AI platforms, in their products in AI automatically. So understanding what those products are and what they're launching becomes very important. And it's very hard for partners right now because these companies are launching, you know, almost every day now, something that's related to AI because the competition is so intense. So
Yes.
that's, I think, the second piece that I would say is, and then of course the third is as the AI assistants become important, like how that partnership piece will evolve once these AI assistants are in place because they are data hungry, right?
Mhm.
So the way it works is the feedback loop, which is automated. So the question that I think partners managers should ask is, what's your place as we go from bespoke
Mhm.
to the democratization of the tools, where you basically a developer can go integrate with these platforms to then the agent ecosystem, if you will, where the data is now aggregated and we really don't need someone to build that connection, right? Because the connection is at the
Yes.
data layer level.
Mhm.
So I think that I would leave the audience with that kind of framing is, as we move from more bespoke to more agent ecosystem, what is the role of the partner manager in all of this?
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of thinking that I'm doing, and hopefully in a few months in the next episode, we can talk a little bit more about how I'm trying to formulate how to think
Sure.
about these partnerships. So yeah,
Yeah, I
I'll.
think in a recent LinkedIn article, our founder Jay also had shared some insights about the similar idea. And I mean, it's still a very open-ended space, right? Like we're not sure how it's going to turn out. But one of the things I was found interesting from that article is like trust and expertise are like the two things that partners should bring to the organization and like connecting to organizations as well. So we feel like at this moment, at least, these things are really hard for AI to replace. At least in terms of job security, partnerships seem to be much more safer than many other roles with the constantly updating AI. But let's see how things turn out. And as you said, things can happen in the data layer, then you never know how fast these things can advance. But yeah.
I do think that partner managers do need to understand more on the ethical AI side
Hmm.
because even in when I was at VMware and as we were starting to do integrations with co-pilots with Microsoft, one of the things that came up which I had not seen in cloud partnerships before was the notion of responsible AI or ethical AI. I
Hmm.
think more and more partner managers need to be aware of the ethical considerations and the trade offs that they're making for short term wins versus long term. And
Yeah.
what would that do? What that would have an impact not just into their organization and their business, but society at
Hmm.
large. And I think that's you often a missing thing because we are so buried in activities, as I said, managing the partner, understanding the customer, managing the internal dialogues, that we are often making short-term trade-offs when we are actually at the position of making the long-term investments. So I think that's kind of, I would say, the last thing I would say is, as you make the short-term trade-offs for long-term,
Hmm.
it's our responsibility as partnerships leaders to think about what it means from an ethical and a responsible AI perspective, because the work we do will have impact on not only our future but also our children and grandchildren's future. So give it a little think, and of course
Hmm.
send me a note on LinkedIn if you get inspired, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are.
Um, so how did you handle partnerships before the era of partner management tools or like cloud GTM tools? Because those are something that are popped up, I feel, quite recently. And you've been in the industry for like a couple of decades. So how was partnerships done in the past? And how have these tools evolved to cater to the needs of the growing partnership role?
I think of course, when when I started, there were none of these tools. So we were using Excel, we were
Hmm.
using, two other tools, Google Sheets, what have you. So definitely some of these tools are useful, and especially for co-sal, especially for tracking. Of course, we leaned on project management tools in the past. um,
Yeah.
what has changed is that, and I think where there's still need for improvement is the data aggregation. And we used a lot of these tools with when we worked with Microsoft, because Microsoft had a co-sell program for last 7 years, and I've been kind of working with them. The challenge is the data in some of the partner organization is still siloed, and the back-end integration of these tools is still complex. Especially, I'll give you an example of where VMware had acquired many companies over time, so they had different um, sales tools. And
Hmm.
because one of the requirements of these co-sell tools, or these partner PRM tools, is that it needs to integrate with the backend of these organization tools. Just like how you have to coordinate across multiple organizations, the tools also have to coordinate across multiple organizations. And until unless that backend is streamlined, it's garbage in, garbage out. So there's still a lot of manual work.
Hmm.
In fact, I remember having this conversation with one of the CEO, is that as a partnerships leader, I just don't need your tool. I also need at least some part-time people who can help me go clean up the data. So going back to the data life cycle,
Yes.
the data cleaning, the data validation, and also how do you get your salespeople to tag in even if once you've aggregated all of it, that this is a partner opportunity. The cultural change and the mindset shift that needs, in addition to the tools, is enormous, and not many people are
Yes.
talking about that, because you have to have that experience of working with these tools to know that it requires human effort, and a shift in the organizational behavior for to adopt these tools. And that's why we haven't seen a lot of impact, and there's still this, the C level and the board conversations about value of partnerships is still being questioned, because we don't still have data at that level to
Mhm.
tell the story, the ROI story well. And
Correct.
it's not that there are no tools. I think we have a lot of tools.
Hmm.
It's that the data hygiene in
Yeah.
organizations, especially both or multiple partner organizations, is
Hmm.
is very, very poor.
Perfect. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Neeti, for joining us today and everyone who tuned in for this session. And hope you got some valuable insights. And if you have any questions for Labra, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn or through our website. And you can also reach out to Neeti on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. It was such a great pleasure to have this discussion with you, and I'm really excited for all those people who are listening and are interested in partnerships. I've always wanted more people to join the partnerships community and be part of the partnerships domain. I'm really excited that more and more people are doing so. So thank you so much for listening.